All right. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches, Bava Kama, Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, and most of Ayin Ches. We'll be stopping 2/3 of the way down on Ayin Ches Amud Beis, and then we'll do the rest of that on Shabbos, plus Ayin Tes. Sunday, Monday, we're in person. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, we're not in person. Emir Sashem, we're back together a week from Sunday. And for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'll probably post and I'll maybe ask someone to give shiur if there's people here. We'll see. We'll figure it out.
What time Friday?
Oh, no, I don't know. No idea. All right. So yesterday we were dealing with a question on the bottom of Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. It was a question of if Rav Shimon is correct that shchita she'ena re'uya is lo shma shchita, so all of these kachim cases should not work. We gave a bunch of answers, two of them in the name of Rav Yochanan. The first answer was of Rav Yochanan was that the animals were tamimim and they were being shechted in the Beis Hamikdash, so technically it was ra'ui. The second answer of Rav Yochanan, it was shelo l'shem bailim, which for its own reasons was also ra'ui. And the answer of Reish Lakish was that we were dealing with an animal that was a balmum. Those were the three answers that were given. And on Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines down, which is where we're starting, that is where we're picking up with analyzing these three answers. And the Gemara says as follows. Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan lo Amar Kareb Shimon ben Lakish. I understand that both answers of Rabbi Yochanan don't align with Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan had a desire to kabayla ukma lemasnisan afilu betmimin. He didn't want the Mishnah to be in this adu kimta of only being about Baalei Mumin. That's rare. That's not a normal way to establish a Mishnah. He would rather it be afilu betmimin. So by us, it's clear why Rav Yochanan didn't want to side with the Shita of Reish Lakish. But why did Reish Lakish not side with Rav Yochanan? Ela Reish Lakish, my time, elo Amar ke Rav Yochanan, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis 6 lines down, because Amar Lach, Rav Yochanan would argue, Utvacha umecharo. Whenever we have a scenario where mechira is going to be eligible for dalad behay, then that should also be true by tvicha. And if you're not going to be chayav dalad behay by the mechira, you're not going to be chayav dalad behay in regards to the tvicha. Now that's part one of the answer. And vahani kodshim, the case of kodshim that we were discussing, where Reb Shimon was of the opinion that shchita she'en re'uya lo shma shchita, so maybe by kodshim it should be a non-starter, because if you do tvicha by kodshim, it's not yours. Since when you try and sell kodshim, that sale doesn't work. So therefore, there is no such thing as tvicha in such a case. And therefore says Reish Lakish, therefore it can't be a case of tmimin because there's never mechira. It must be that the only way we could ever have mechira by kodshim is if the animal becomes a balmum. That's why he went in that direction. And the Gemara says a quarter of the way down, both Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, the machlokes that they're having over here also shows itself in another place. The Gemara says the Itmar. The Amoraim had a machlokes. Hamocher treifa. If I sell an animal that is a treifa, L'divrei Reb Shimon, according to the Shita of Reb Shimon, that shchita she'ein re'uya lo shma shchita. According to him, if I try and sell a treifa, Rav Yochanan Amar Chayeb, Reish Lakish Amar Pater, and for the same reasons as before. Rav Yochanan Amar Chayeb, because afal gav de lese betvicha, even though there's no such thing as tvicha by a treifa, ise b'mechira, you can still sell it. However, as you'll recall, Reish Lakish Amar Pater. Why did Reish Lakish say you're pater if you sell a treifa? Because kevan de leise betvicha, since the shchita is invalid, leise b'mechira. In other words, to summarize the shitas of Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, it's like this. Reish Lakish is of the opinion that there's an interdependency between tvicha and mechira. If one can't work, the other won't work. Masha'ein kain, according to Rav Yochanan, the fact that you can sell without a kosher tvicha, or you can do tvicha without a proper mechira, that's fine. The two dinim are not inextricably bound, and you can separate the two. So that is what's going on over here. But the Gemara, about halfway down, a third of the way down, asks a kasha, Eisvei Rav Yochanan on the Reish Lakish, Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Ganav kiloim. Let's say you steal an animal that was created by crossbreeding in a halachically inappropriate way. So the din is v'tavcha. If you then slaughtered that animal, or treifa umachra, or if you have an animal that's not kosher, the animal's treif, and you sell that animal, the din is mishalim tashlumei arba v'chamisha. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't this the shita of Reb Shimon he? And Alma afal gav de lese betvicha ise b'mechira. Even though the tvicha is not good, the mechira is good, and therefore this is a kasha on Reish Lakish. Because remember, Reish Lakish said that tvicha and mechira are inextricably bound. If one doesn't work, the other can't work. Yet over here in the Brisa, what did it say? It said treifa machra. Why didn't it say treifa v'tavcha? So therefore, we see that this must be like Reb Shimon, and perhaps this Brisa is a kasha on Reish Lakish. The Gemara says, Amar le lo. Reish Lakish will say back to Rav Yochanan, this is not a problem. Really, this Brisa is Rabbanan and not Reb Shimon. Asks the Gemara, I Rabbanan treifa b'mechira isa b'zvicha lesa. Would it be the case, according to the Rabbanan, that we would say that by a treifa you're able to sell it, but by a zvicha, by this treifa you're not able? That can't be either. So this Brisa is very complicated. The Gemara says, "Ve'elamai, Reb Shimon." You can't say it's Reb Shimon because of what we said before. After all, kilayim betvicha isa b'mechira lesa. With an animal that's kilayim, who cares if you're selling it or if you're doing shchita? It's still an animal that's kilayim. Ela says the Gemara, Elatana tvicha. You're right. Really, the Gemara says tvicha. V'hu adin l'mechira. The halacha applies across the board. So we only used half the language. I ema l'rabbana nami tana mechira v'hu adin l'tvicha. Maybe according to the rabbis, we should say the same exact thing. V'Rav Yochanan Amar lach mai hai. Rav Yochanan says, stop. None of this makes any sense. This doesn't make any sense, this argument. I amris bishlama Reb Shimon. If you want to say we hold like Reb Shimon in regards to the fact that shchita she'en re'uya is lo shma shchita. Aidi de tana treifa bechada, tana kilayim bechada. We said treifa in regards to one aspect, which was mechira, and kilayim in regards to one aspect, which is in regards to shchita. And really, it's just poetry, but really it applies to both tvicha and mechira in both cases. Eli amris rabbanon. But according to the Rabbanan, this brisa should have been different. Na'arvinhu v'nisninhu. We should weave it all together, the tvicha and the mechira, according to the Rabbanan. How so? It should have said ganav kilayim v'treifa, and not just do machran. Tavchanu machran. Weave them together if you're the Rabbanan. And then say mishalim tashlume arba v'chamishat. So the Gemara says taka, that's true. Kasha. That is a difficulty in the Gemara. We don't know exactly how to learn this brisa. And there are a few options, but the Gemara doesn't really like any of the options. Let's discuss kilayim. We know that there's an isser called kilay behema. It's usher to be marchiv. Marchiv is actually the word for trees, which is to graft. Really, what we're saying here is that you can't take two animals and breed them together to create a new min. That's not allowed. We're not allowed to do that. Science does it all the time. We also genetically modify animals, which would be based on sugyas like this. Is a genetic modification of an animal and then the cohabiting of that animal, is that considered kilayim, yes or no? Two versions of a set, two versions of a keves, two versions of an aze, dali, right? What are the halachic statuses of these animals as it relates to flesh, as it relates to the isser of kilayim, and as we'll soon see some applicability with dalid behe? Not simple. So in regards to kilayim, let's discuss. The Gemara says seksiv. We have the word se in the pasuk, and Rava has a drasha. We're going to spend some time on Rava's drasha. So Amar Rava ze bana av. The word se teaches us a principle, a big rule. Kol makom shene'emar se eino elo lahotzias hakilayim. This is the problem. We wanted to say in our Mishnah, in the middle of the page of Brisa, actually, the Brisa that Rav Yochanan asked on Reish Lakish, which is exactly at the halfway point on the page, we wanted to say we were dealing with a case of kilayim. The problem is that Rava has a rule that whenever we see the word se, it's used to exclude animals that are kilayim. So how can the Brisa, in fact, say that it's talking about kilayim? Says the Gemara, Shani Hacha, our case is different. Our pasuk is different. What's going on in our pasuk? To Amar Kra, O lerabos es ha-kilayim. The word O teaches us to include kilayim. Okay, that's nice. It's sure o chesef o a's. We have the word o in the pasuk when it speaks about a se. So maybe the word o, it comes to include kilayim. Says the Gemara, not so simple. 5 lines from the bottom, first of the long lines. The chol o lerabosu. Every time we have the word o, it's an inclusion. That's not true. The Tanya, shor o chesev, prat lekilayim. When we had the word se and the word o, Rava wanted to argue that it was an inclusion. Here we see the shor o chesev and the word o is prat, is an exclusion. And as well, o is prat lenidme. This also excludes a case from the pasuk of a case of a nidme. A nidme is an animal that is born from two parents of the same min, but it has a malformation. It doesn't look like that min. It doesn't. It's a two sheep have a baby sheep, but it looks like a cow. So it's wrong. Something's wrong with the animal. It doesn't look normal. That animal is called a nidme, and it's not roy legabi mizbech in regards to the shor o esev o chesev o eis ki yivalei. All right, but anyways, what we see from this drasha, from this brisa, is that the word o by shor o chesev was used to exclude kilayim. So the word o clearly doesn't always include kilayim. That's for sure. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, hacha mein yane dekra, hacha mein yane dekra. This is what we call contextual learning. You have to read and see what's going on. Hacha gabe geneva. In regards to the case of geneva, the pasuk says shor o seh, and a shor and a seh, a cow and a sheep, they cannot be bred together. They have different gestational periods. They don't have babies in the same way, and therefore you can't breed them. This is shor o seh. You can't crossbreed these two animals of a shor and a seh. Therefore, when it says oh, because it's impossible for those to have a child, so therefore we're going to include the case that's not obvious, which is kilayim. However, gabe kodshim, last line on ayin zayin amid beis, dechsiv kesev ve'ez, the word oh it has to function in a way that's different than the pasuk. It's either including or excluding. If the shor and the seh cannot have a child together, and we have an extra word oh, it must be to include, because kilayim would have been automatically excluded based on the pasuk, because they can't cohabit. They can't have children. So the word oh has to have a purpose. The word oh must be, therefore, to do the opposite of what was pashut in the pasuk. What was pashut in the pasuk is that a shor and a seh cannot be bred together. Therefore, the word oh has to include something. And masha'enken in regards to kachim, dechsiv chesev ve'ez, there those two animals are similar enough. What then is the function of the word oh? It can't be to include kilayim, because that's already included in the pasuk, because these two animals are able to breed. Therefore, oh is lema'etu. So that's how Rava gets around it. The word oh is not magically always to exclude or magically always to include. You have to look at the context and you have to see what's going on. And that's how we would darshan the word oh. But there's no rule that every time we see the word oh, it is automatically X or Y. It's just not the way that things work. And as well, we've spoken now about Geneva, and we've spoken about Kachim. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. V'hagabe Kachim nami ne'emar shor o chesev. Oh, this is a kasha. This is a problem. We just said on the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amid Beis in regards to Kachim, there's a pasuk that says kesev ve'ez, and therefore the word oh was to exclude. The problem is that in the world of Kachim, we also have a pasuk of shor o chesev on the top of Ayin Ches Medal. So therefore, that means she'ena tayachal lahotzi kilai mi benem v'nirbi. That means that the word oh in that case should be inclusionary. So we have tarte desastre. We have the word oh in two different places in regards to kachim. One time it implies to exclude kilayim from the din. One time it implies to include kilayim from the din. What should we do? Says the Gemara. Well, midaseifa lamait, from the end of the pasuk we're excluding, like we just saw. So therefore, reisha nami lamait. Maybe we should say that all cases of oh are to exclude kilayim. Says the Gemara, why? Adirabba, midaresha labrabos, seifa nami larabos. Okay, but I could have argued the exact opposite. That if in the resha where it says shor oseh, and we said oh is larabos, maybe the end of the pasuk is also oh larabos. It can't be that in one case oh is lama'et and in one case oh is larabos, because they're both talking about kachim. We need an answer to the question. You can't just flip flop. There has to be consistency. So it says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, 4 lines down, Hi Mai. If you want to say, oh, by Kachim, it's coming to exclude Kilayim. Hu de itzrich tre miute. I could understand why I need the word oh twice. We're excluding two things from the world of Kachim. What are we excluding? De afal gav de imait Kilayim, even though one of the words oh will be mamait Kilayim. Okay, but itzrich as well, limute nidme. We have two cases that need to be precluded by the word oh. And therefore, that's a reasonable way to learn the two words of O by kachim. One is to exclude a case of kilaim, and one is to exclude a case of nidmeh. However, and we're 8 lines down on Ayin Ches Amud Aleph, Ela I Amris LeRabos, if in fact you want to say that both times the pasuk by kachim says the word O, it's to include kilaim, what does that mean? Trei ribuye lama. Why do I need 2 ribuyim to include kilayim by kachim? Hashta kilayim irbile. If the Torah is already including kilayim, I don't need one for nidme mibaya. Let's remember, if kilayim are included for kachim, that means that 2 animals that should not have bred together had a child. If the Torah is allowing that animal for kachim, then this animal that's a nidme, that's a mutant and looks funny, both of its parents were both kvasim, ksavim. They were both regular animals. Okay, the animals malformed. If you're allowing kilayim that's crossbred pashut, you'll be allowed to have nidme. I don't need the word O twice. So therefore, the Gemara says it must be that the word O is lama'et, and that's what we would assume by kachim, is that by kachim we use the word O to teach us 2 exclusions in regards to kachim. We exclude kilayim from kachim, and we exclude nidme. And there are no inclusions with the word O. That's how the Gemara concludes. We are a third of the way down on Ayin Ches Amud Aleph at the words Ela Hada Amar Rava. The Gemara says, all right, let's dig into Rava a little bit. Ela Hada Amar Rava. Rava taught us this rule at the bottom of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. What was the rule that he taught us about kilayim? He saw the word se, and he said, Zebana Av. This teaches us a binyan Av, right? This is, the Yud Gimel Midos Shator Nidresh has been. One of them is binyan Av. Kol makom shene'emar se, einu ela lahotias hakilayim, lemai hilchasa. So when Rava said this din, that kilayim are excluded, what case was he talking about? Ila kachim, that's for sure not the case. This Rava can't be talking about kachim because behedrik sibahu shor ochesev prat lekilayim pashut, and like we saw at the top of the page, there's no question that by kachim kilayim are excluded, and Rava could not have been teaching us a din that was obvious. Ila meiser, if you want to say we're talking about meiser, that also can't be, and we're not going to go into this. We're going to accept it at face value. Tachas yalif mikachim. We extend with Gzeira Shava from the world of kachim to the world of Meiser, and therefore Rava can't be talking about the case of Meiser either. Ila Bechor, if we're talking about a firstborn animal, that also can't be what Rava was talking about, because ha'avara yalif mi Meiser. We have a multi-layered kal v'chomer. We have kachim to Meiser and Meiser to Bechor. Inami as well. Nidme amris. If you want to say we're talking about a nidme amris, lo, that can't be. Dechsiv ach bechor shor. Ad sheyehi hu shor ubechoro shor. Not only does the adult have to look like a cow, but the calf has to look like a cow. You can't have an animal that mamish doesn't look like its parents and bring it on the Beis Hamikdash. You're not allowed to do that. That animal is a nidme. So kilayim mibaya, a pasha that we don't need that. So what then is the din of Rava? What was Rava coming to teach us that needs to exclude kilayim? We already know kachim excluded kilayim. From a Gzeira Shava, we know that Meiser excluded kilayim. From another Gzeira Shava, we know that, what was the third one? We know that Bechor was removed. We know that Nidme was removed from kilayim. Everything. We got it. So what then is the case that Rava is teaching us a chiddush? The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, Ela ki itmar de Rava le'inyan peter chamor. We're talking about the din of redeeming a peter chamor, which is typically redeemed with a seh. And what Rava is coming to teach us is that it can't be a seh that's partial seh and partial other animal. It can't be kilayim. Kiditnan. Ein podin. You're not allowed to redeem a peter chamor. Lo be'egel, v'lo b'chaya, v'lo b'shchuta, v'lo b'treifa, v'lo b'kilayim, v'lo b'koi. Remember the koi? We learned about this in Shas a few times. This animal that's a suffik chaya, suffik behema, which generates massive halachic issues in shchita, which chalavim you're allowed to eat, because there are differences between chaya and behema v'chule. Lemaisa, this Mishnah, it's not a slam dunk that kilayim are included, and I'll show you how I know. Rebbe Lazar, dematir bekilayim. We know that there's a machlokes about this. So Rava was coming to paskin on this We have the Mishnah 2/3 of the way down that Ein Podin and including Lo V'Kilayim. And then the Gemara says that's where Rava comes in. Ul Rabbi Elazar de Matir by Peter Chamor in regards to Kilayim. That's non. Rabbi Elazar Matir be Kilayim ibnei Shuseh l'may hilchasa. We understand according to the Tana Kama who says Ein Podin Lo Be'egel Lo B'Chay B'Chule Lo B'Kilayim. Rava that was coming to teach us that. But according to Rabbi Elazar, who's Matir Peter Chamor be Kilayim, what was Rava coming to teach us? L'may hilchasa. So the Gemara responds on behalf of Rabbi Elazar. Amar Lach Rabbi Elazar. Ki itmar de Rava, what was Rava talking about when he said kilayim are excluded? That's dealing with a very unique and limited case. Litame shenolad min hatahor, an animal that is tame, was born from a mother that's tahor. The iburo min hatame, she conceived, the female animal conceived from a tame male. And in that case, udulok Rabbi Yoshua, this disagrees with Rabbi Yoshua, but it is still Rava. Rava was coming to teach us about this case. Let's dig into Rabbi Yoshua. What did he hold? The Rabbi Yoshua, miseksavim v'seizim nafkale. He learned out that din from another set of psukim. Ad sheyehei aviv keves v'imo kivsa. The only time the animal is kosher is when the mother and father are the same. Says the Gemara, I understand now. You've given me the case where even according to Rabbi Elazar, that we have the din of Rava to exclude kilayim. Thank you, I understand Rava. But we have a side issue. What is the scenario where you have a female cow, a female animal that conceives from a tamei animal? Says the Gemara, utahora mitmeya mi me'abra. This seems to be a biological / halachic question. The Gemara assumes that an animal that is tamei cannot impregnate a female animal that is tahora. That's what the Gemara says, mi me'abra. And the Gemara says there is one case scenario where this is true. Zekai Malan, as we turn to the top of Ayin Ches Amud Beis, de I'abar mikalut kerib Shimon. We're talking about a case that Reb Shimon details elsewhere of an animal that's a kalut. An animal is a kalut, is an animal that's otherwise kosher, but it has a flaw. It's a kosher animal, but in this case, its hooves are not split like it should be. Malformation, not normal, right? But that's what the Gemara says is our case. If that animal, which otherwise would be kosher, a deer, okay, a kosher animal, but it's malformed and its hooves are not split like they normally are, and they're connected, and that animal impregnates a tahor regular female deer, that's a case of a tameh that impregnates a tmeya, where according to Rabbi Elazar, we would have to say that that's where Rava's coming in to talk about that case. Okay, let's go. The Gemara says in the top of Ayin Ches Amud Beis, we have to go 2/3 down the page. We will definitely get there in time. Boy Rava, in a case of Harei Alai Ola, this language is very specific. If a man were to say about himself, Harei Alai Ola, he accepts upon himself an Ola, that means he's Chayev Ba'achrayusan. That means that he's obligated to make sure that that animal or its equivalent is brought on the Mizbeach. So if he says Harei Alai Ola, the Hifri Shor, and he separates a cow according to his language of Harei Alai Ola, and then Uva Acher Beganav, but then the animal that he separated for Hektish was stolen. If all of that happened, then, says the Gemara, Mi Patar Ganav Nafshe Bekeves, could it be that he could bring a different animal as an Ola? Cows are expensive. Maybe he'd rather bring a keves, which is half the cost of a cow. Would that be okay? Or be'olas ofla Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or could he even bring a bird? Meaning, when someone says Harei Alai Ola and he selects a cow, is he locked in to bringing the cow if that animal gets stolen? Or no, can he downgrade either to a keves or even lower, even to a bird? Do we just need the din of Ola, or do we need a shiur? That's the Gemara's question. So let's see this three-way machlokes in regards to the Mishnah. We're 3-4 lines down on Ayin Ches Amud Beis. It's none. Harei Alai Ola yavi keves. If a man, says the Tanakama, makes a commitment of Harei Alai Ola and he separates a shiur, the halacha is he has to bring a shiur. If he brings a keves, he has to bring a keves. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, no, yavi tor o ben yona. You can bring any kind of animal you want as long as it has the din of an Ola. So what's the din? And now the Gemara articulates our question in full. Mi amrinan shem ola kabel ilave. Do we say that when the man said Harei alai ola, he was accepting upon himself the din only of ola, not specific to the cow that he had separated, and therefore, if the cow gets stolen, he can even put aside a shiur, a keves, a yona, any animal he wants. O dilma matzi omar leib, the bezdin can say to him, on a mitzvah min amuchar, but you did it the wrong way. We want you to do it the way you intended. The way you intended was with a cow, so you should be bringing a cow. Which one is it? So this was a question of the Gemara that Rava asked. As we see on the top line, it says Bai Rava. And on the third of the wide lines, we see that Rava was giving a shiur on this. Basar de Ibaya, Hadar Pashta. Rava gave an answer to this question. What was Rava's answer? Ganav, Patar Atzmo Bekeves, L'Rabbanan, and Be'ola Sa'of, L'Rabbelozer Ben Azariah. He answers black on white, very clear. If I say Harei alai ola and I separate a cow and the cow gets stolen, I do not need to spend all of that money to replace the cow. I can buy a $7 bird from the store and repurpose it as an ola, and I've checked my box of Harei alai ola, no problem. That is the answer. Now, there's another framing of the same answer. Rav Acha Bereder Rav Ika Masni Labeheja. Rav Acha Bereder Rav Ika said that Rava actually said this explicitly. He didn't even ask it as a question. Here's how he said it. Omar Rava Harei alai ola v'hifri shor v'acher v'ganvo. If a man says that I accepted ola upon myself and he separates a shor and then the shor got stolen, what's the din? You're allowed to take any animal and replace the shor, provided that it has a din of an ola. So that is going to be the question and answer for this top section of the page. That brings us to a new Mishnah. Let's say that I steal your cow, and then machro, I sell your cow. What's typically the din? Daled behei, pretty typical. However, what if I maintain ownership when I sell over one portion of that animal? Machro, I sold your animal, but chutz mi echad memei shabo, I kept 1/100th of the animal. So I sign over a shtar to you. I say, here you go, Reb David, I'm signing over a shtar to you. Here's my cow. You give me $1,000. You know what, actually, just give me 900. Just give me 990. I want to keep just a little bit of the cow. So what's the din in such a case? Or, oh, shahaisa lo bo shutfis, or you and I together own the animal. Two people owned it. Or hashochet v'nisnab lo biyado, an animal that was shechted, but it came a nevela in the process of being shechted. This typically happens with a poor shchita. Often if the shchita knife has a nick in it and it drags some of the flesh of the simanim, the animal's a treifa, a nevela, excuse me, not allowed. Or hanocher, we spoke about nechira yesterday. Rashi gives quite a graphic description of nechira. Rashi says in the Mishnah, about halfway down in the Rashis, koro mi nechirav ad libo. Yikes, not fun. Scalpel from nose to chest. That is not normal. And you also can't do shchita that way. Shchita has to be across the neck and not in this vertical axis. That won't cut the kana and the veshet. So that's nechira. V'hame'aker, someone who, with their bare hands, tears out and uproots the kana and the veshet, which is not a kosher shchita as well, obviously. In all of these cases, we only hold you accountable for the kefil. Mishalem tashlumei kefil, but you didn't do shchita. Ve'eno mishalem tashlumei arba v'chamisha, because you're a fool. You thought that in any of these cases you did shchita. That's not shchita. By the mechira, that's not mechira, to hold back 1/100. So what we're going to discuss now is, what was this guy holding back when he said, I'm willing to sell you my cow, but I'm holding 1/100. Okay, let's dig in. My chutz mi echad mi mea shabot. If I steal your cow and sell it, what was the intention of the Mishnah when I said that I'd be keeping 1/100th of it? So the Gemara says, this is a machlokas between Rav and Levi. Amar Rav, a quarter of the way down, chutz mi davar hanitar imo b'shchita. I'm excluding one thing that becomes mutter to me in shchita. I want one cut of the meat. Whatever the cut of meat is that Romanian makes into corned beef, that piece is mine. You can have the rest. I want one piece of meat. That's what Rav says. The Levi Amar, no. Even if it's chutz mi gizoseha, even if it's the shearings of the animal, the wool or the fur of the animal, even if you hold that back, that will not be considered a proper mechira. V'chein Tana b'masnisa, Tanya b'masnisa, we have a brisa, chutz migizo seha, that supports the shita of Levi. So Rav wanted to say, what am I holding back in my 1/100th? I'm holding back basar, actual part of the animal. And Levi says, no, even a non-essential piece of the animal like the gizo seha, like the shirings. Meisvei, the Gemara says, we have a kasha. Machra, chutz miyada, chutz miragla. I'm selling you the animal, except for its foot, foreleg, or its hind leg, or chutz mikarna, with the exception of its keren, chutz migizo seha, except for its shearings. Eino meshalem tashlumi arba v'chamisha. That's the sheet of the Tanakama. Rabbi Omer, no, that's not correct. It's davar hama'akev b'shchita, only something that would be li'ikuva to the shchita. If an animal had no lungs or missing a lung, a real mum, then einu mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha. Then we would say no arba v'chamisha. But in contrast to the Tanakama, who held that the gizo seha, that the shearings would create for a scenario where the mechira is no longer daled behe. That's not true according to Rabbi. And b'she'enu ma'akev shchita, if it's something that's not ma'akev the shchita, the shearings, then Rebbe would hold mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer chutz mikarna. If you have left out the horns of the animal, then einu mishalim arba v'chamisha. However, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says chutz migizo seha. If all that you saved over in your mechira was the shearings of the animal, then mishalim tashlume arba v'chamisha. Then the din is that you would in fact pay arba v'chamisha. So, Bishlama Levi, I understand according to Levi's shita about the gizo seha interrupting the punishment of daled behe. I can find a shita in this brisa. The Tanakama of this brisa agrees with Levi, or I should say more accurately, Levi agrees with the Tanakama of this brisa. No problem. Bishlama Levi ketanakama. But the shita of Rav, the davar hanita rimo b'shchita, that is not found in this brisa. It's not the Tanakama, it's not Rebbe, and it's not Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Ela Rav Kiman. Rav who says that when the mocher is holding back 1/100th, that he's holding back meat, that's not a shita in the brisa. Who does Rav hold like? Says the Gemara halfway down, just about halfway down on Ayin Chesem and Beis. Amar Amre, we would say, Rav de Amar ki Haitana. Rav would say, like an altogether different brisa. There's another brisa that discusses this, not just the three shitas that we just saw. What is the precedence for the shita of Rav, that when the 1/100th that's held back in mechira is meat, that we no longer are chayav tashlume daled v'hei, ditanya. The brisa writes as follows, about a quarter of the page to go, and then we'll stop. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer machra chutz mi yada, chutz mi ragla, einu mishalim arba v'chamisha. Reb Shimon ben Elazar in this brisa says that if I, as the ganev who's trying to sell this animal, if I sell it on the condition that I get to keep the foreleg or the hind leg, there's no tashlume daled v'hei. However, chutz mi karna, chutz mi gizo seha. However, when it comes to the horn or when it comes to the shearings, then Reb Shimon ben Elazar would hold mishalem tashlume arba v'chamisha. So the Gemara says, b'mai kamiflage. What then is the argument in the previous brisa with the three shitas? Tanakama savar utzivacho kulo ba'inan. The Tanakama says we need the whole animal for mechira, and therefore nothing doing. Umecharo kulo ba'inan. The Rebbe savar, Rebbe who gave a split in the brisa above, who said that it's only davar hama'ake shchita that ruins daled behe. That's because utvacho midi dehabe b'tzvicha. La fuke midi de lo havya b'tzvicha, to exclude something that doesn't negatively impact the tzvicha. And umecharo dumya de tzvicha, the rules are the same. And in that earlier brisa of Reb Shimon ben Elazar savar karna de lo lemigza kaima, the horns were not typically cut off of animals, therefore havya shiur. That's considered something left over in the contract, and therefore it interrupts the daled behe. Ve'enu mashalim tashlim arba v'chamisha. And gizo seha, but the shearings, dilemegas kaime, all animals get their first sheared. Then lo have a shiur. That's not considered something that interrupts the contract, and therefore mishalim tashlim arba v'chamisha. So therefore, Rav has precedence in one of these shitas. The idach tana de Reb Shimon ben Elazar savar. The other shita, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, what does he hold? He holds savar yoda v'raglav the tzriche tzvicha. The foreleg and the hind leg are a part of the tzvicha; they're necessary. Therefore, have a shiur that interrupts the daled behe. V'lo mishalim tashlim arba v'chamisha. And karne begizo said the lo tzrichet tvicha lo have a shiur. So Rav can feel comfortable in this new brisa, holding like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. There's only one quick problem left to deal with, and then we'll stop. Kasha the Reb Shimon ben Elazar, ad Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The Reb Shimon ben Elazar in brisa number 1 at 1/3 of the way down disagrees with the brisa of Reb Shimon ben Elazar that's halfway down. And the Gemara says, as is typical in Shas, don't worry, Shrei Tanae ve'aliba the Reb Shimon ben Elazar. You're right that those shitas are different. If you look at the first shita of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, he says that if you wanted to hold back the horn, that interrupts daled vehe. If you want to hold back the shearings, it doesn't interrupt daled vehe. In the next brisa, he's talking about yada and ragla, which is not mishalin, and Karen and Gizos are in the same category. So does Reb Shimon ben Elazar put Karen in the same category as Gizos? Yes or no? The two brises seem to argue. The Gemara says, don't worry. Shrei Tanae ve'aliba Reb Shimon ben Elazar. There's a machlokes about that. We're going to stop right here and pick up at the words Tanu Rabbanan on Shabbos. I believe Daf Yomi is at 3:20 p.m. We will pick up right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.